So the Pentagon is in a little bit of chaos, which is probably the lightest way to put it. Just yesterday, we got news that Secretary Hegseth had a second Signal group chat. Same one, sharing detailed strike information about the upcoming military operations against the Houthis, but this time it was on his personal device, sharing that info with family and friends, which isn't, it's not great. At the same time, another article came out in Politico, this one pinned by John Uliot, a former top Pentagon spokesperson under Secretary Hegseth, who said the last month has been a full-blown meltdown at the Pentagon and called on Secretary Hegseth to resign. It's a lot. Now, anybody who has watched this channel before knows that I try my absolute best to approach what are inherently political subjects, like war, conflict, and national security, through as nonpartisan a manner as possible. And I understand that's an impossible line to walk, but I'm going to try my best because I do think that's really important. Inevitably, that means I'm going to upset people in every general direction, and I know that's happened, but we're going to try that again today. And in turn, what I'm going to do is run through the different series of allegations here from the New York Times, from Politico, the former aide, and then from 3 other senior officials that were released this week that put out a statement a couple days ago. We're going to get into the official DoD responses and then turn to some statements in support from the right side of the aisle and some statements against Hegseth on the left, responses, if you will, from across the government. All of this will be linked in the description below. Let's get started. New York Times article says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared detailed information about forthcoming strikes in Yemen on March 15th in a private Signal group chat that included his wife, brother, and personal lawyer, according to 4 people with knowledge of the chat. Hegseth sent the private group of his personal associates some of the same information, including the flight schedules for the FA-18 Hornets that would strike Houthi targets in Yemen. It included his wife and about a dozen other people from his personal and professional inner circle. He created this group in January, called it Defense Team Huddle, prior to his confirmation. And according to people familiar with the chat, they said this was accessed on his private phone rather than a government device. Now, again, I'm going to try to be very clear when I'm moving from the statements from the report, as we just had there, to a personal opinion. We're entering personal opinion here. That is classified information. The flight schedules for FA-18s that are on deployment in a contested airspace, getting ready to carry out kinetic operations, that's classified, full stop. There's just no 2 ways around that. Before it happens, that's, yeah. And it's been frustrating personally, and I've gone on some rants, how people have tiptoed to try to say that actually this isn't classified, because it is. It puts our pilots' lives at risk, and should this story in the New York Times be proven accurate, then that is incredibly reckless, and there's no other way to put it. It was reckless in the Signal chat originally, even though most of those were cabinet officials, because there was still the reporter that nobody knew was there, which is a bit of a problem. If the same thing happened here, it is arguably even worse. So that's not good. Never, ever, ever want to put our service members at risk as they're flying these operations. Now, moving on to the Politico article. This one was written by John Uliot, who is the acting assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, kind of the forward-facing, talking about the PR guy, if you will, right? Here's what you should say, how you should say it. Here's what the statement should read. He's been working, goes back, let's say, they said he was the Deputy Political Director for Communications on the 2016 Trump campaign, Marine Corps veteran, Harvard graduate, served as the head of communications at the National Security Council from 2019 to 2021, and the Assistant Secretary for Public and Intergovernmental Affairs of the Veterans Affairs from 2017 to 19. The guy has spent a lot of time in Trump's government. All right, so this is an ally, and this is going to be a theme for the next couple of accusations here. But Uliot says, quote, the article he penned was former top Pentagon spokesperson details month from hell inside of the agency. He said total chaos at the Department of Defense is becoming a major distraction for the Trump administration. Now, we should note, he says that he left his role voluntarily, but there was reporting, Newsweek said they received an email on Thursday that he was asked to resign, and the Associated Press heard that as well. So I do feel like we should mention that. Uliot says, I stepped down voluntarily. A couple other organizations are saying he was resigned. You have to take that into consideration when there's, aggressive articles like this against someone's former boss. In Uliot's piece, he says, quote, the president deserves better than the current mishegas. I don't know that. It's like mistakes or chaos at the Pentagon. It's quite the word. Given his record of holding prior cabinet leaders accountable, many in the secretary's own inner circle will applaud quietly if Trump chooses to do the same in short order at the top of the Defense Department. That's something. Saying that people that are like inside of Hegseth's close group, his senior advisors, his supporters, would support Trump finding a different secretary is a pretty incredible statement to make. All right. Then moving on to some more of the details here, they say the latest flashpoint is a near collapse inside the Pentagon's top ranks. On Friday, Hegseth fired 3 of his most loyal senior staffers: Senior Advisor Dan Caldwell, Deputy Chief of Staff Darren Selnick, and Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. In the aftermath, defense officials working for Hegseth tried to smear the aides anonymously to reporters, claiming they were fired for leaking sensitive information as part of an investigation ordered earlier this month. And we actually heard from those 3. They spoke out, because the DOD hasn't. And we have their statement we're going to get to here next. But Oliot says none of this is true. While the department said that it would conduct polygraph tests as part of the probe, not one of the 3 had been given a lie detector test. In fact, at least one of them had told former colleagues that investigators advised him that he was about to be cleared of any official wrongdoing. Unfortunately, Hegseth's team has developed a habit of spreading flat-out, easy debunked falsehoods anonymously about their colleagues on their way out the door. They say, yet even strong backers of the secretary like me must admit, the last month has been a full-blown meltdown at the Pentagon, and it's becoming a real problem for the administration. Notable piece here in both Oliot's article and then the next statement here from Caldwell, Carroll, and Selnick is they are all still very, very supportive of President Trump and his continued agenda. They're pushing back on the way that things are being carried out, essentially saying this is not meeting the president's requirements, is probably the best way to put it. Then turning over here to the next statement, this one coming from Caldwell, Carroll, and Selnick. Throw this in the category of accusations. These are the 3 senior officials that Oliot mentioned there that were placed on administrative leave and then fired. And it was kind of suggested that this was due to leaks inside of the Pentagon, but they spoke up because the Pentagon hasn't said anything about this at all. Nothing from DOD as of this recording around their firings. They spoke out and said, quote, "This is a joint statement from Caldwell, Carroll, and Selnick. We are incredibly disappointed by the manner in which our service at the Department of Defense ended. Unnamed Pentagon officials have slandered our character with baseless attacks on our way out the door. All 3 of us served our country honorably in uniform. For 2 of us, this included deployments to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And based on our collective service, we understand the importance of information security and worked every day to protect it. At this time, we still have not been told exactly what we were investigated for, if there still is an active investigation, or if there was even a real investigation of leaks to begin with. While this experience has been unconscionable, we remain supportive of the Trump-Vance administration's mission to make the Pentagon great again and achieve peace through strength. We hope in the future to support those efforts in different capacities." I would not be all that shocked to find out that all of this is kind of connected. You're seeing people that don't understand why they're fired, maybe want to take something out on Hegseth, whether it's valid issues or not. So one of the claims I've seen thrown out there is that some of these 3 individuals here that just made this statement may have been on that initial January group chat where Hegseth was sharing classified information, and maybe now which makes sense. They've been advisors of his. They've been close with him for some time, long before he came into the Pentagon. So entirely likely that they would have been on that group chat. They might have been some of the ones to push this information out. You say enough's enough. We're going to put this out there as well. Now, turning to the official response, the only one I've seen so far, and I'm recording this at 8 a.m. Central on Monday, April 21st, 2025. This news all came out yesterday. DOD did not publish any official statements until late last night. We got something from their spokesperson, Sean Parnell, where he posted, quote, "Another day, another old story, back from the dead. The Trump-hating media continues to be obsessed with destroying anyone committed to President Trump's agenda. This time, the New York Times and all other fake news that repeat their garbage are enthusiastically taking the grievances of disgruntled former employees as the sole sources for their article. They relied only on the words of people who were fired this week and appear to have a motive to sabotage the Secretary and President's agenda. There was no classified information in any Signal chat, no matter how many ways they try to write the story. What is true is that the Office of the Secretary of Defense is continuing to become stronger and more efficient in executing President Trump's agenda. We've already achieved so much for the American warfighter and will never back down." And that's generally the theme. We're going to move here shortly into some statements in support of Secretary Hegseth. The theme is generally this is fake news, or it's fabricated, or it's people coming at Hegseth. That tends to be kind of the general stance taken not just by DOD, but by some of Hegseth's supporters. The only statement I've seen from the secretary at this point was over on X or on Twitter. The Democratic Party page said Pete Hegseth needs to go, which is kind of what we're hearing from the left side of the aisle. And he responded with, quote, "Your agenda is illegals, trans, and DEI, all of which are no longer allowed at the DOD." So we actually do have a statement from the Secretary of Defense that just came out while I was editing this video. So let's go ahead and play that here.
What do you want to say, sir, about the signal chat controversy?
You know, what a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. And on hoaxes, time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids, because, you know, this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. Hoaxsters. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know it, we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much. Have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way.
Turning to the right side of the aisle, people generally in support of Secretary Hegseth. We have commentator here, Charlie Kirk, that said, quote, "When they came after Hegseth, just remember everything they don't want to talk about. Recruiting is up, morale is up, standards are up, efficiency is up, America's influence is up, and most importantly, lethality is up. What's down? Only the influence of neocons and warmongers and the use of the military to promote politicized nonsense. That's what they want back. It's not about the signal chat." Laura Loomer, who, again, we're not seeing a lot from government officials at this point, so we're kind of going off of influencers, if you will, commentators that do have a lot of influence within the government right now. Laura Loomer said, quote, "Notice there's a massive effort to fire Hegseth, but there isn't an effort to demand accountability at the National Security Council, the DNI, and the DOJ. The deep state just wants to purge MAGA loyalists from the admin instead of firing Biden holdovers." All of the people that left DOD at this point, the three that wrote that letter, and then there was one more that moved internally, and then Oliot, so 5, I guess. All of them were brought in by Secretary Hegseth. I feel like that's important to stay here. So those weren't holdovers from previous administration. These were all people brought in by this team. So it was their own people they brought in. And then a pretty interesting one here, we actually have an active duty military officer speaking out in defense of Secretary Hegseth and against some of these allegations, and kind of defending him against those allegations, which you don't see often because, look, it can be risky. Stepping into political discourse like this, partisan discourse at times, while still wearing the uniform full time. Nonetheless, here we have Adam Dortona, which small world, small army, I guess. He and I crossed paths, kind of know each other. Back in 2010, 11, and maybe 2012, we deployed together as part of a 2nd Brigade, 101st Airborne Division. Relatively small group there. So I was the lowly company FSO down with Dog 2502, and Dortona was in the 3 shop up at battalion. So, you know, we did our best at the company level to never cross paths with those guys, but that's just kind of how the Army works. Nonetheless, here we go. This is me right here. Little proof, valor proof, stolen valor proof, or whatever you want to call it. But you don't want to look at me. Look at this group. Absolute warriors. This is Dog Company 2502 Infantry. One of the most proud things in my entire life is that I get to say that I'm associated with this group of people in any way, shape, or form. Just an incredible group across the board. Absolute honor to be able to serve with them for any period of time at all. But nonetheless, while there with Dog Company, Dortona was there as part of battalion, and then we went back to Eastern Afghanistan a year later, and I think he was a part of that deployment as well, but we were on different teams in different parts of the country. Nonetheless, that's not the important part, just kind of interesting that we crossed paths. Moving on to his statement. A Politico hit piece penned by a disgruntled insider who didn't get the job he wanted, whispers in the dark, half-truths and full-blown projections passed off as journalism by a dying institution desperate to reclaim influence it no longer holds. But let me be clear, this is exactly what we voted for. Not calm, not ceremony, not preservation of the old order, destruction. Destruction of the bureaucratic rot. Destruction of the protected class that's been sabotaging the will of the people through procedure, not principle. What you're seeing now is not chaos. It is the long-awaited answer to decades of betrayal. The republic is not collapsing. The rot inside it is. And that sound you hear, that's us taking it back. And to Politico, next time in a war of words, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Which, again, don't usually see that. Agree or disagree with the sentiment. Don't usually see that from active duty military officers in any direction. It can be a risky career move to kind of lay bare political thoughts like that. So we'll see. But I thought that was interesting that we are seeing at least somebody in uniform willing to stand on that line to defend Hegseth in this particular instance. Now, personal opinion here. I think we got to be really, really, really careful with people in uniform, especially in active duty, speaking about things that can be construed as taking a political stance, talking about who we voted for and why. It makes me nervous, and it's not. And it doesn't matter which direction it's in. We've done a really good job at keeping the military apolitical down the ranks. Like when you start interacting with soldiers at lower levels, there's nothing political about it. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but it's incredibly professional. It's been my experience. And I think an apolitical military is a good thing. And anything that starts to move the ball towards a more politicized force from within, that makes me really nervous. And we'll see. Maybe I'm too nervous for nothing here and overreacting. But nonetheless, shifting over to the other side of the aisle, some Democratic responses pretty much in line with what you'd expect here. We have Senator Chris Murphy saying, quote, Hegseth has to go immediately. Then we have Senator Alyssa Slotkin who said, quote, you can't turn chicken shit into chicken salad. Never heard that one before. As Hegseth's staffer is now telling the world, Hegseth has turned the Pentagon into a place of chaos. Our military and our country deserve serious leaders. If he cared about the institution he's leading, he should man up, acknowledge he's a distraction to the military's mission, and resign. And then we have Representative Pat Ryan, who didn't know this, West Point guy. He graduated the year before I got there, so didn't get, this is a whole episode of people I've crossed paths with. Kind of cool, huh? Or except I didn't in this case, I guess, because he left before I got there. But either way, Representative Ryan said Pete Hegseth never should have been confirmed as Secretary of Defense. Anyone with an ounce of respect for our military would have resigned weeks ago. What the fuck else do we need to see for Trump to do what's best for our troops and our country and fire him? End quote. So there's going to be a lot of this unraveling in the next couple of days. I imagine as of now it is, I don't know that I would necessarily call these stories single source, anonymous sources in the New York Times, probably. So, take it with a grain of salt and wait to see what the follow-ups are here. And I'm very interested to see how Hegseth addresses this stuff, right? You would expect to see some statements from the Secretary himself, more from the official DOD accounts, probably some sort of press conference, not just addressing the allegations against the Secretary, but arguably more important, addressing the people that were just removed this last week. Because if you want to continue to draw in the best people, and that's who we want at the Department of Defense, is always, always, always the absolute best. And if we're going to do that, it needs to be clear that when you're there, how you're going to be treated and what you can expect in terms of rules, regulations, and standards. And right now we have 3 senior guys that are saying, I have no idea why I was fired, and then I was slandered on the way out the door. That's not going to be inspiring for the next generation of leaders to step into that role. So we hopefully get a lot of clarification on all of this. But again, all of these sources will be linked in the description below if you want to check them out. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.